and thereby rendering the effectiveness of monetary policy to be impotent, as it were. And there are major reasons why the policy has been introduced. First one is to drive economic and social development and modernization of the payments system. In line with the advanced economies, in line with practices in the top 20 economies of the world. In those economies today, very little cash transactions occur. And secondly, the need to reduce the cost of banking services. And of course, like I said, monetary policy is being rendered ineffective with so much cash transactions and stacked away in the informal sector of the economy. Monetary policy is being rendered ineffective, in terms of ability of the monetary authority, that is the Central Bank of Nigeria, to control inflation. And importantly, a cashless policy would avoid, the negative consequences of too much cash, in circulation. For example, you have very high cost of printing notes. And those notes are being abused every day in our social gatherings, in celebrations, parties, and you find that new notes
has to be printed over time
very frequently, and the cost of printing is very high. Also, the cost of handling, cash, banknotes is also very high in terms of not just printing, but distribution, processing, transportation. And that one is taking a lot of money. And you see, the issue of inconvenience for users of cash and question of safety. Cash is very susceptible to robbery. You hold large volumes of cash and then you are traveling by road, then you are waylaid and your money is taken. You go home empty-handed. Whereas if you were a trader and you are based in Benin City, you want to buy goods and services in Lagos, you don't have to take any cash, maybe a little cash with you, just for emergencies on the way. You get to Lagos, you can, through the electronics means of transactions, take your money or even make payments to your customers on phone, right on the spot, and so on. So that one is avoided, other than the issue of inconvenience. Then, of course, question of the negative effect of cash on corruption in terms of enabling or facilitating corruption. Corrupt practices, money laundering are facilitated through the use of cash, because you can't easily trace somebody.
Where the cash is coming from.
Yes,
and where
you
it's
want
going
to bribe me, you carry 10 million naira in cash and come and give me. But if you have now to make transfers,
it's traceable.
It's very traceable and so on. So, in a nutshell, we can say that the cashless policy is beneficial to consumers, to companies, and even to government. Individuals benefit through greater convenience of making payments, and safety. They are less prone to attacks because they are suspected to be carrying money. And then companies, you'll find too that they have greater access to capital. They are able to avoid leakages, in the system. And government, one of the challenges government has is revenue. And some of the revenues collected tend to be misappropriated or fraudulently appropriated by those who are handling them. So with electronic payment system, such leakages and fraud in tax revenue eliminated to a large extent. So more revenue accrues to government. Okay. So everybody, government, individuals, and companies benefit from a cashless policy.
Okay, let's look at the targets. Yeah. Why set targets for Nigeria to move to a cashless economy instead of allowing the system to just mature and naturally get to that level? Doesn't that put pressure on the consumer, the bank itself?
No, not really, because like I've said before, the essence is not to punish consumers or to punish companies or agencies and so on. The essence is to make the payment system efficient, make payment transactions more convenient and safe for individuals. And those factors we're taking cognizance of in setting what you call targets. Well, the target set actually relates to some kind of sanctions,
okay,
as it were, for using cash above certain thresholds.
Okay.
And, like for example, if you have to deposit 500,000.
Okay, we'll come to the new policies
okay.
As part of implementation of the
yes.
cashless policy. Okay, but since you mentioned the threshold,
yes.
let's talk about the one that was implemented by Central Bank in September, where they imposed charges on deposits over 500,000 for individuals and then deposits over 3 million naira for corporate bodies.
Yeah.
Now, how would that affect the small and medium enterprises? For instance, you have to make a deposit of 1 million naira and then you're charged 3% of
yeah.
that amount. To the small and medium enterprise, that is some amount of money. But to the big businesses, they may not really mind because of the bulk payments that they do have. And so the person paying or the customer may not even want to use cash. It's just done electronically or through transfer. Do you think that will have some implication on SMEs?
No, not really. Not really, because of the empirical information available. As at today, less than 10% of Nigeria's population conduct cash transactions that are more than 150,000 naira per day. In other words, the majority of Nigerians do not have the capacity to conduct transactions in cash of 1 million or above. And the threshold that has been set by the central bank is 500,000 naira. If you have a cash lodgement of up to 500,000 naira, you will not pay any charge,
okay,
any fee. But anything in excess
of 500,000,
let's say 1 naira, if you deposit 501,000 naira in the bank, the first 500,000 naira will not attract any charge.
It's the 1
naira.
It's
the 1,000 naira that will charge 3% charge.
Okay.
And the essence is actually to discourage massive movements of cash in the interest of the individual or corporate enterprise that is engaging in cash transactions. Because, like I've explained, there are numerous payments channels which can be used, with so much convenience, and to the extent that, very small, tiny proportion of Nigerians actually, on a daily basis, conduct cash transactions of more than 500,000 naira. You find that majority of individuals and the small enterprises will not be affected, by, the deposit and withdrawal kind of policies.
Okay.
So, and it's the same in advanced countries, that have gone nearly cashless. I sometimes find myself embarrassed if I go to a shopping mall to purchase something, and at the payments counter, I will be the only one
with cash,
bringing dollars or euro out to pay. Every other person, even if it is $5, they bring out their credit or debit cards, and it's done. And that's what is already happening in Nigeria. Many people are already getting used to using their ATM cards to make cash at peak points and so on and so forth.
Now, before we come to the POS proper, let's talk again about the charges. Now, some have said 3%, even if you have to impose charges, is on the high side, 3 to 5%. Why not bring it lower, even to maybe 1% or below 1%? No,
I think, but the question that one would not normally ask in such a situation is, why do the individuals want to be lodging huge sums of money? If it is honest transactions, majority of people, most people have access to banking services. Why can't you transfer from your phone or from your computer, or get to a banking hall, collect a transfer form, complete it, and make the transfers which the person will receive immediately? Let me tell you this one. In Benin City, for quite some time now, when I make a purchase in town, 10,000, 20,000 or thereabout, I don't bring cash from my pocket. I ask the vendor if he or she has a bank account. He say, yes, can I transfer to you? Within 2-3 minutes, I do the transfer in his presence. I show him that it has transferred. And maybe instantly too, he or she will receive an alert. And that settles the transaction. So the fear of carrying cash, those days you want to purchase a car, you carry 3 million or 10 million naira, all that fear is not that. So there is really no reason why people should be scared of using electronic transactions, or still want to engage in huge cash lodgements if the transactions, don't involve something which we don't know. Yes,
if it's shady.
If it is not shady, then why would you not make a transfer? You get to the bank and do it if you don't want to use your phone or something like that. So, but if you must use cash, you still have the leverage to use, to do it up to 500,000 naira. So the ordinary people, are not bothered by this. They are not scared of this policy. I believe they are happy with it. Tell me, in Benin City here now, how many traders sell goods and services in a day? It's mostly small.
And then they make sales of about 500,000 and even more.
And so on. How many of them are doing business? And
but we're talking generally,
how many women
not only in
traders have POS?
Now let's talk about POS. What is the criteria for assigning POS to a business?
No, I think the criteria, there is really no criteria as such that is hindering. A businessman or a businesswoman, has an enterprise, has a trade, you look at the volume of your transactions, many people come to spend money, big money or small money, and you feel it's more convenient for you that you don't want a situation whereby at the end of the day, you are carrying, you are having 1 million naira cash or more, or 500,000 naira. That is very susceptible to, a situation whereby you lose the money. There have been cases in the past where, traders have been attacked. Some people leave their money cash in their stores and then lock it up and go home. The following morning, the shop has been burgled into, and then the cash is gone. There is even a case near my house in Ugbowo area here, 2 weeks ago, somebody who is a petty trader, you know, selling drinks and a few other things, you know, claimed along the street there, you know, a shop, claimed that some people burgled into his store and that they stole 3-point-something million naira cash. What was he doing with 3-point-something million naira cash in the shop?
All right, now still talking about the assignment of POS. Does the bank consider the volume of transaction you have before they can give you POS? Does it have to get to a certain level? If it falls below that level, does it mean you cannot have POS if these things are considered?
Well, I don't really know if there are such, you know, conditions, because I know my own school, Goldmark Education Academy, when we applied, they just gave us a form, we completed it, and over time they gave us the POS. So they didn't really talk about volume of.
Okay.
And by the time we applied, we just had few enrollments because the school had just started. All
right. Now let's talk about POS charges.
Yeah.
Why would you charge the user POS?
No, it's part of the cost of handling processing. You know.
But it's more like you making a transfer on your phone. It's more like you making any electronic payment. Why separately?
No, because the banks are not the end of the transaction. The transactions will still have to go through inter-exchange. In other words, there are some costs in processing that payment for it to get into the account of the bank. So it's part of the cost of processing. You know, and you know, banks are in business to make money. They are not philanthropic organizations that will say, but I know that some organizations, you know, that have POS decide to bear the cost of such transfer, which is 0.075 or so percent of the transaction. But
wouldn't that eat into their profit, because POS charge per transaction is 55 naira, which some businesses used to bear before. But right now, it seems like some have considered that it eats deep into the profits and now push the cost of POS usage to the consumer. So if I have to pay 55 naira for every POS payment that I make, at the end of the day, it does not work against cashless policy. Would I not prefer to come with cash and make payments instead of using my card, and at the end of the day, I'm charged 55 naira?
Yeah, but that one is not much, because
you would say it's not much. If I'm buying an item of 2,000 naira, for instance, and I'm charged 55 naira extra because I make payments with POS, don't you think, logically reasoning, it means that I should just come with my 2,000 naira and then make payments, go home without any extra charge? Does that not discourage the cashless policy?
Well, maybe, but for such small-scale transactions, you are still permitted within the policy framework to use your cash. So if I'm going to buy something 2,000 naira or even less than 10,000 naira, if I have cash 10,000 naira, I will just pay it there. Some people do that one.
But it takes away the convenience, which is part of the advantage of a cashless system. Like if I don't have cash with me and I need to purchase some items, I shouldn't bother about that. I should just walk into the shop and then hand them my card, make payments. But if I think of the charge that comes from it, that may discourage it.
No, what some organizations do, some companies or medium, large-scale institutions that use POS machines is to absorb that cost, rather than transferring it to the customer. In some cases, the organization or company shares that POS cost with the customer to encourage the customer. So in most cases, for fairly large organizations, they absorb the cost because it's a bit minute. But I know for individuals, low income, that one could be something they think is heavy on them. But perhaps for very large transactions, but if it's for small transactions, that one will still not be too much.
Now, do you think it's something that can be done away or even reduced below the 55 naira that is being charged right now? Is this something that can be done away?
No, if there is a huge outcry against that one, and empirically it is found that it is militating against the embracing of the cashless policy, I'm sure the monetary authority would, review the policy in that regard.
Okay.
Policies, and most policies are not sacrosanct that you cannot touch them. Based on performance of the policies in practice, there is that tendency that there could be some reviews, some amendments here and there to satisfy the interests of all stakeholders. So if there is evidence that, majority of people are not happy with the 55 naira, so I'm sure the bank, would take a look. But bear in mind that the POS charges have been in vogue now for some time.
It is, but it's becoming an issue now that some business, some corporate bodies can no longer or seem not to be able to bear the cost anymore, and so they're pushing it to the consumer. I've had a personal experience where I walk into a shop and then I needed to use POS, and then I was told upfront that you would have to pay for it. Now, the person didn't say that my account would be debited. It said I have to pay in cash for the charge that will come to her for using POS. But because I had to use, so I just said, okay, fine.
You paid the cash?
I had to give her the cash because I needed to use POS. And that seemed to be the system along that line. Any shop you go to in that environment will tell you if you're to use POS, you would pay what they charge is 100 naira extra. They tell me, okay, you give me the 100 naira because I will be charged for POS use. And some persons will tell you, oh no, they don't want POS because when customers come in and they let the customer know, they just decline to use POS. Now let's look at other charges that comes with being cashless. If you have to buy airtime from your bank, okay, at the end of the day, there seems to be a certain charge that goes with it. And you also sent an alert by your bank, maybe at the middle of the month, and they call it card maintenance charge. All these charges put together, at the end of the day, don't you think these seem to be like burden on the consumer compared to what you would go through if you use cash?
No, you are very right. I know consumers have complained about apparently numerous charges, that deposit money banks, have, which tend to impact very heavily on, the users of bank services. You see, this is the reason why, from time to time, the monetary authority, that is the Central Bank of Nigeria, being alive to its responsibility, reviews these charges and provides guidelines to commercial banks on what charges are allowed and the extent of such charges. So the bank, from time to time, tries to, prevent the situation whereby customers, bank service users are being exploited.
Okay.
So I can assure you that once such complaints come to the bank, and incidentally, the Central Bank of Nigeria has a consumer protection department.
Okay.
At the headquarters in Abuja, and it has branches in all the state capitals. So whatever bank complaints that customers have in relation to banking services, the central bank always takes them up. They provide a basis for reviewing extant policies, all in the interest, of bank customers and, the banking public in general.
Okay. But considering all of this, do you still think that having a cashless policy is the way to go?
Yes. I'm very convinced because...
I mean, having a cashless system
yes,
is the way to go.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
Okay.
because I feel that the benefits of the cashless policy very much outweigh whatever costs there are.
Okay.
Because whatever policy you have, there are always costs and benefits. And in this case, the benefits to the consumer, to the business enterprises, to government, very much outweigh whatever the costs. Definitely there are challenges with the policy.
Okay.
And importantly too, the policy does not obviate the use of cash.
Okay.
Cash is still used for a certain thresholds levels.
It just minimizes it.
We want a situation whereby more of transactions are carried out, electronically.
Okay.
So like I said, there are problems with the cashless policy. Particularly in the rural areas, for example,
okay,
you have, even in the urban areas, you have a small proportion of people that are not literate,
okay,
and may not be able to engage with electronic, means of payment. And even in some rural areas, access to banking services may be very limited.
okay.
So in such a situation, you see, you cannot say there will absolutely be no cash transactions. So such people, are not yet captured within the cashless policy system. Secondly, there is a problem that, the logistics are not adequate. Logistics like POS machines, which you talk about, internet services, they are grossly inadequate in a number of areas.
Okay.
The POS penetration has no doubt improved, but we still find a number of places that POS should be used, but it's not yet used. But you don't find them there,
okay.
And you find that the power infrastructure is a major challenge to the success of the cashless policy. We all know the situation about electricity supply in Nigeria today. And cashless policy is driven by technology. And technology depends on power being available 24 hours.
Okay.
Otherwise, how do you go to ATM at 12 midnight and there is no power even at source? Then you cannot access your money and so on. So those are major challenges,
okay,
at the moment. Well, the other challenge or problem is that, you see, by printing notes, Naira notes, government once in a while is able to do what we call deficit financing. In other words, is able to finance its deficit when expenditure is projected to be more than revenue,
okay,
by borrowing from the central bank,
okay,
through printing of notes. But if notes were to completely be out of existence,
so what it would spend to print notes goes into other things.
Yes, and no, that what it means that notes will not even be printed because there will be no basis. Maybe
if they are to print some for those who may not be able to use the cashless system, it will be much compared to when you have to print for everybody. Yeah,
we can still print for those categories of people, but government will not be able now to use the printing of notes exclusively for financing its own deficit. In other words, by borrowing from the central bank.
Okay.
But, there is, in light of the challenges I've enumerated, central bank can still do a number of things to improve the system, along with other stakeholders. All
right, now as we wrap up the discussion on cashless policy, do you think achieving a cashless economy by 2020 is still feasible in the light of these challenges you just talked about?
No, I think with the way that implementation has progressed, and if we take cashless policy to mean a situation whereby the proportion of cash used in overall transactions is reduced significantly,
okay,
then the policy will be achieved by 2020.
Okay. All right, if you just joined us, it is Business This Week on Independent Television. We'll take a break. When we return, we'll talk about Nigeria's rising debt level. Don't go anywhere.
The Yuletide is here again.
Oh Lord, our eyes are on you. So,
Shower your blessings. Shower your blessings. But God does not come down. He sends his vessels.
yeah, ITV Radio presents the Sambale Day of Christmas, aka
Invite Sambalating Father Christmas, aka Father Blessing, to put smiles on the faces. November 2019.
We hereby call on schools, churches, and corporate organizations to make their booking now, as visitation is on first come, first served basis.
Santa Claus is coming to town.
For booking, 0834
Indian Radio Sambalating Father Christmas.
Shower your blessings.
All right, it's good to know you're still with us on Business This Week. So right now, let's talk about Nigeria's rising debt level. Okay, currently Nigeria's debt stands at over 27 trillion naira. That is huge.
Well, yes. Well, the data I have actually indicate 25.7 trillion as of June this year.
Okay.
Perhaps I don't have the updated data if there is any, but I know the Debt Management Office, the latest data that I accessed indicate 25.7 trillion.
Okay.
And that is very high. But we should note that that is the public debt of all the three tiers of government.
Okay. Federal, state, and local.
Government, states, and local government. But the federal government debt, you know, accounts for the lion's share.
Okay.
About 80%. The remaining 20% is accounted for by the subnational governments. And the total debt of 25.7 trillion refers to both domestic and external debt.
Okay.
As of today, the domestic debt component accounts for about 80%, while the domestic debt component accounts for about 68.2%.
Okay.
While the external debt component comprises accounts for 32.8%.
Okay.
And so you find...
So we have more of domestic debt than foreign debt.
Yes, as of today. But the government has a policy
Okay.
which we have expressed reservations about to actually increase the component of external debt to 40%, so that the domestic debt will be 60%. That is the aspiration, that is the strategy which the federal government has as at the moment.
What would be the implication of that if we have the external debt at 40% and then the domestic debt at 60%?
Well, the implication,
what difference would that make?
Well, the reason why government has that strategy is that the external debt or acquiring external loans is less costly.
Okay.
And that interest rates abroad are much lower than, you know, interest rates in the country.
Okay.
Because Treasury bill rate, government rate today is about 11 to 12%.
Okay.
And so that's the reason that they say it's cheaper to borrow abroad than to borrow within the country.
Okay.
But some of us have argued that that is not enough to keep borrowing abroad, because the country cannot use naira, print naira notes and use to service, you know, external debt.
Okay.
The country must earn foreign exchange by exporting goods and services. And the foreign exchange position of the country today, you know, is such that whatever happens to the oil market makes us uncomfortable. with
Yes,
respect
it gives
to
a
foreign
shock
exchange.
to the economy.
So there is foreign exchange shock and possibly interest rate shock. So to that extent, it is not really desirable to be accumulating more and more
Foreign
external
debt.
debt.
Okay.
But let me say this, because you talk about the size of the debt. The size of the public debt as of today is worrisome.
Okay.
It's worrisome, although the federal government will argue very correctly that the ratio of the total public debt of over 25 trillion, to the gross domestic product is very low, and with the limits out by international norm. Actually, ratio is a little less than 20%, maybe about 19-20%. Argues that true, that the ratio of total public debt to gross domestic product is low. Servicing
Of the debt.
the debt,
Okay.
revenue 20 by the subjects. And the country is becoming gradually becoming unable to service the debts as and when due. And the reason is because the country has challenge.
Okay.
Revenue is not flowing into the country as expected. Even when the government budgets its amount of revenue, that at the end of the year, 50% will be realized.
Okay.
That has done in 2017, 2018, in 2019, this year. The president budget and 90, well, revealed 58 projects for this half of this year was realized.
So we'll have been having continuous deficits.
Yes, which means we'll be having continuous shortfall, which means then that 42% of the revenue projected was not realized.
Okay.
It means then that if we project that one to the end of the year, it's possible that at most about 60% of the revenue projected will be realized, which means then that most of the expenditure items budgeted will not be implemented. And that is even one reason why capital budget implementation as at today is about 30%. Government budgeted 3.18 trillion this year for capital projects. As at the third quarter, only 294 billion naira had been released.
Because
Out of
there's
that
a
amount.
shortfall in
Yes.
funds available.
Yes, and we are told that, hopefully, before the year ends, about 600 billion naira more will be released for capital projects, which means then that less than 1/3 of the capital budget for this year would have been implemented, as it were.
Now
So
let's-
revenue is a major problem,
Okay.
for servicing the debt. Debt is worrisome, not because the size in relation to gross output is huge, but because of the money required to service
To
it.
service the debt. Okay, now, International Monetary Fund, IMF, have advised the federal government that to handle this, to be able to service the debt,
Yeah.
the government should widen its tax nets.
Correct.
And they've even increased tax, which the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry have agreed with. Do you agree with that?
I believe very strongly that government must adopt innovative or imaginative approaches to raise more revenue, because that is the major solution to most of the problems that we are having. If the revenue profile, increases very significantly, then the country's ability to implement the budgets as announced, will be very, very high. In other words, the government will be able to, construct more roads, more transport infrastructure, more schools, provide more money for health, education, that we are all saying are getting worse, and so on.
Okay.
So revenue generation is the defining factor. And government, cannot say we should continue to depend on oil, because the oil market, the futures market, prices projected for next year are not heartwarming at all. the projections show that, in 2020, the prices prevailing in the world oil market are likely to be in the neighborhood of $50 to $55 per barrel.
Which is not good for Nigeria.
And that one would be lower than what we are using in the budget, which is not good for the country. So the implication is that government must do the needful to generate more revenue. That's why I fully support the value-added tax increase to 7.5%. Actually, I had argued in 2015, early 2015, through the newspapers that the VAT should be increased to 10%, because as at the moment, Nigeria's VAT is one of the lowest. Maybe if you talk about 5 countries that have the lowest value-added taxes, Nigeria's will be one.
Okay.
Other areas to generate more revenue. The issue of properties, the elite class have gigantic properties all over the place. If they are taxed, tenement rates paid, government will get more revenue. Tax revenue is the more stable and predictable source of revenue for planning and development purposes.
Now, about the VAT, do you think it's time for us to have different VAT rates for different items? We have uniform VAT rates. So if everybody pays the same 7.5% on whatever you buy, what about those who buy luxury goods? How about having a different VAT rate for them that is higher so that you get more from such?
Well, let me say, theoretically, it's a good suggestion, but implementation will raise some practical difficulties.
Okay.
Ability to now start discriminating luxury items from non-luxury items. But Nigeria's VAT, as of today, even takes cognizance of, basic commodities.
Okay.
They are not taxed.
Okay, what are those basic commodities? Let's have it known again.
Basic commodities relating to food items.
Okay.
Those ones that were not covered before, the president listed them out. He even listed, yams, rice, gari, fish, meat, basic things that the ordinary person buys. So, and before now, most of those commodities were not, within the purview of the value-added tax, so that ordinary people will not be adversely affected by the tax. And with the expansion of the list of commodities now, you see, the hue and cry about VAT, will actually be unnecessary. Because if we're saying we are fighting for the common people, the less privileged people, they have been taken care of to the extent that the goods and services which they consume are not covered by the VAT.
Okay, let me ask.
Most of the goods
let me ask now.
Yes.
Bottled water, is it vatable?
Potable water.
Bottled water.
Bottled water.
Is it vatable in Nigeria?
Yeah, but bottled water is not a commodity for the ordinary person.
For the ordinary person?
No.
Okay, but we know that we have issue of water supply, and so some persons have to do with that.
About bottled water is the elites that buy bottled water.
Okay,
it's
so
not
that is out of it.
people.
All right, I had to ask you that because someone was saying, how do you know which item is vatable, which item is not vatable, so that some business places don't take advantage of consumers, and then you say everything is vatable. So I had to use that, for instance, bottled water. So you say those are not basic. It has to be the basic thing that ordinarily the low-income earner would go for. All right, now, so IMF also advised the government to harmonize its forex rates. What benefit would that do Nigeria?
Well, yes, I read about it, and I know, before now, there has been the official rate, which is really not an active rate in the sense that it's used for heavy transactions, not at all. The official rate is the government rate fixed at 305 or 306 naira. I think the government uses it largely for making budget estimates. And most other government transactions are done at, non-official exchange rate. And the market rate is the importers and exporters windows, or investors and exporters window, which is about 357 to 360. There's the bureau de change rate too. Those ones are the market rates.
Okay.
And the government uses the official rate to estimate the budget. It's not the rate for transactions that are conducted. So, but I think the major reason why the IMF feels that they should be converted, because it tends to give an erroneous impression that the country is actually, having, dual exchange rate or multiple exchange rate, which in reality it is not, because that rate more or less is dormant.
Okay.
Except to the extent that it is used for making budget projections. But the advantage of harmonizing it is that if that official exchange rate is abolished, the government does its transactions at the, investors and the exporters window or rate. It means that next in the 2021 budget, for instance, will be estimated at, that market-related rate, at a higher rate.
Okay.
Which means the revenue from oil projected will be much higher.
Okay.
And if it is higher, it means then that the budget deficit projected will be much reduced.
Okay.
Because to make it clearer, at the rate of 305, if $1 million earned from oil export is to be converted to Naira, then $1 million at 305 will give you 365 million Naira.
Okay.
But if the market rate of about 360 is adopted, then the estimate of that revenue of 1 million will be 360 million.
So we'll have more.
So you have more revenue estimates for the budget. So if the production estimates are realized and the prices of oil are also realized, then government will have more revenue estimates.
Okay.
More than the 8 points something that we had in this year's budget.
Okay.
That means then that the revenue projection will be very near the budget, the expenditure projection, or even surpass.
Okay, so that reduces the pressure that governments have. All right, we're out of time, but just in one sentence, what do you think about our borrowings, what they've been channeled into, and if we had to make future borrowings, what should we channel our borrowings into?
Well, let me say this, that if we must continue borrowing, like I've argued in the
There are no
past,
guarantees that we would not borrow.
No, well, we may have to borrow. Government is already considering borrowing $3 billion from the World Bank. We have to borrow, then we have to borrow very prudently and responsibly.
Okay.
And make sure that borrowed funds, particularly foreign borrowed funds, are deployed to activities in the economy that can help generate foreign exchange,
Okay.
or increase productivity of enterprises that will generate foreign exchange, which can be used in
To
servicing
service
those
the
loans
debts.
and so
Okay.
on.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Michael Baden, for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much.
It's been a wonderful one. My name is Blessing AJ. Until next week, mind your business. It only becomes a business and remains so when you put your mind to it. See you next week.
This is ITV. Certainly the best.
The beginning of IO enterprises, the name we sabi well for textile material matter. They call all of now where they go on the chart. Sake of say, he don't bring on the chart company for all kinds of Nigerian wax, Java gold, brocade, article brocade, e-press, big and small hiding, Java wax, lens, land, including pollution, all these for the wholesale price. I beg on to textile. You do well for this documentation where you don't become Benin. For play by or for special order for political or ceremonies. Or make you hurry come our office where they 6 Local Road. Carry side they look Travis Christian College for Benin. Or call with number where be 0803 244 7512 or 070 5566 5400. Oh no, Chiobodo Enterprises. And now, in God we trust.
My people, una don hear for cooking gas matter and the model cooking gas don't take over. Oh, this one no be say I hear say we don't bring our gas plant come where everybody feel reach am. No more going to Kafanchan to buy gas. Una know say gas need to tell somebody say I want finish. Oh, now make we don't bring our gas plant come where everybody feel reach am. Our gas na correct original when them filter very well, and you fit buy any amount or any kg, even if na 50 naira gas. Obelego, we go sell them for you. This one na correct Torio. Who here tell who never hear. And the model cooking gas sitting on gas with the treatment batons. And model cooking gas they for number 247 MM Way after Igbinedion Secondary School, just after Byte Engineering. We also there for number 4 Oko Ogba Airport Road inside Benin City. You fit even call us for our green for 070-3593-6476 or 070-3266-1446. And the model cooking gas them be baba.
Welcome to our world. Cambridge Hyatt Hotel, 10 Agborofo Street, off Etete, GRA, Benin City. Telephone 052-257-183, 0805-661-7882, 0802-541-2447. Cambridge Hyatt Hotel, comfort and luxury redefined.
This is ITV. Certainly the best.
Sunu waiting
Thank everybody for the time I watch television. But today now don't they complain say things not too dear for me too. All people just the price of this country Nigeria. I greet you. Che! Pepper them. Pepper them. We go pepper them. Pepper them. Them. Pepper them. I'll go for now. But not go close than now. Until they have no first. Just go up past 4 years. They don't come down.
For where? Next level carry and go up one more.
But now federal government now don't. There's all the border now. They don't close them now. So that could they buy Nigerian goods?
They close them. They put to tax 7.5% to worsen the situation. Something of 500 don't become 700 naira. Something 700 and 1,000.
No. You know they encourage our Nigerian manufacturer.
It's good, but where is the industry? Where do we build it? It's good if we produce. But who do they encourage to? Whom do they encourage to produce? And nobody.
Okay, make I tell you what the people they talk now, the masses they talk now. Say now when they say something now, carry just increase the price of goods.
Now lie, who talk and lie? No guesses. He knows here 7.5% tax. He know here.